Hi all, freeze cracked here. Hey, it's kind of a windy day. I haven't videoed in a while and I get to feeling bad because I haven't done one. So I thought I'd start off with a show and tell like I did last time, and I don't think I've shown this stuff before. It's all recent, it's since that last one. So anyway, in no particular order. This is, okay, what's the best way to do this? This is a Harrison turkey tail made out of raw and kind of crusty, dadgummit, I don't believe it, Muldrow chert from Kentucky. Kind of like Fort Payne, but whatever. This was a really, really tough piece of Texas root beer. Really tough. I did some practicing on really tough recently. This also was really, really tough, and this was a good result for me. It was a very good result for me because I can't figure out how to show you all the scar patterns on it. But this thing is thin and it's super tough material, and I was working off really, really thin edges on it, so it was a good result. This was also a super tough piece of Texas root beer. This, on the other hand, was an overheated piece of probably Texas material, and I have no idea where I got this. No idea. It just, I found a biface sitting around that I had made, I guess. This is raw West Texas Kinley rock, and the exercise here, it was tough and it was raw, but the exercise here was edges, and so trying to do edges a certain way. I experiment with different things. This was a punted old preform from April or something probably, that I just punted to a base notch on it and finished it. This was tough, tricky piece of Knife River flint. A lot of cattails in it, whole bunch. And that was actually a good result from the rock. I was kind of amazed that I got the rock biface and got a big preform out of it. This is another exercise on thinning. I was trying to thin and get the edges really thin. And I think it's 5 millimeters thick at the thickest, and it's, I can't remember how many millimeters wide it was. Anyway, this was a, believe it or not, a percussion slab. I think I ran 2 sets or something, 3 sets of indirect percussion on this, and then pressure. And this is some more of Jim Hopper's Indian paint jasper. Okay, I wanted to show you this because it's a problem. If you ever get the chance to work silicon wafer, this is silicon wafer, and the problem with this stuff is it does not fracture conchoidally. So it's a little bit controllable, but it stutter steps and crushes and does all kinds of weird stuff. And so you don't work it the way you normally would. What you want to do is, if you want to ever make a point out of this, get yourself a slab that is very close to the right dimensions for your finished point. And I think I would recommend trying to push your first set of pressure all the way past the center line, overlap them, and then try and retouch the edges. Because what happens is the structural integrity of the surface is kind of messed up with your first flakes, and if you don't get it to go to the center every set you push, you come in with your width and you're pushing harder and harder, and it just never gets to the center. And you're like, why won't my flakes get to the center? Well, they don't have anything to run on. They don't run right on other flakes. So kind of needs to be worked backwards from usual. This is a Fulton turkey tail made out of Indiana hornstone, and I don't work a lot of this kind of stuff, so I always struggle with trying to get it like I want it, but oh well, it wasn't bad considering. I have no idea what the story is on this thing. I think that it was a really difficult initial reduction to get the length and the width that I got out of it, so it doesn't necessarily look like much, but I think that this was an achievement from what I remember, but I don't really remember the details. Every once in a while I like to make a Pandel type twisty point, and so that's what this is. And basically, you know, this is different from the way most of them that you would see, because it's percussion left on the right sides on both sides, and then pressure on the beveling resharpened area, and opposite pressure, you know, on the base. So anyway, you end up with I don't know, there's no way I'm gonna get this right. You end up with a twisted point that's beveled opposite between the base and the, see? There you go. So anyway, twisted points are not rare in Texas. There's a lot of twisted points in Texas. I was really thrilled with this. That was a two-colored piece of Randy Buttes from North Dakota. It's fossil wood. It's an ironstone silt type stuff that's been silicified, and it's real difficult to nap cleanly and well because it's about 3 times denser or something than regular napping material, real dense, and yet it's kind of a silt stone. It doesn't have the structural integrity on your edges, and your flake tensile strength, it just isn't great. So if you look at it wrong, it's going to step. So to get this out of it, I was like thrilled. That's one of my favorite points I ever made, just because I think it's a real achievement. I sort of like this, but mainly just because of the colors. It's a turkey tail, but it's neat flint ridge material. This was an exercise in making a thin Edenish type point out of keokuk. Oops, I'm trying to focus, but I don't know where I've touched the screen. Out of keokuk, and then pressuring it on leather, and I don't know if you can see this surface or not, but keokuk doesn't like to run long. It likes to run wide, thin out, and hinge, and so there's a bunch of little fingernail hinges on this, but I don't care. I really think that was a good piece. It might not be the most attractive piece to some people, but it is the balance on that blade is good, the edges are good enough, and I like it. This was another one of those things. I've got a bunch of pieces of flint ridge that I've stockpiled over a couple of years, and you know, you save stuff till you get better, and then, you know, you end up, I guess, never working it. Well, I started working a little bit of it, so I kind of like that Clovis. It's got some pretty big shots across it. More color on one side than the other. Okay, so then the past couple of days in the frame of saving stuff to get better or not, I've started hitting big rocks again. And I haven't ever had a lot of big rocks, and so I haven't worked big rocks a lot. I don't have the skill level when I scale up my work, I don't have the skill level that I do with the smaller stuff, because everything is different. It's a bigger challenge. So anyway, this is a piece of Georgetown from a big rock that had a whole lot of cracks in it, crack all the way, well, down to the wire. I mean, you know, when it was a little bit thicker than it is now, it was down the wire. The problem with this stuff, one of the problems is, you know, you have this bias in favor of starting early with getting it whipped into semi-final shape. Well, you can't really do that with real thick, big pieces, because with Georgetown, especially wet Georgetown, it's a little squirrely. But Georgetown, like, it's really high quality flint. What it likes to do is it likes to, if you hit it very hard, you get concavities. It tends to run wide. It tends to finish in concavities. And so if you're not careful, you will confound further flaking and make it where you have trouble coming in. It's a race against losing width, because if you put a bunch of concavities and stuff, you don't want to then lose a bunch of your width beveling off to eliminate the concavity, so you can get to a thicker area and undercut those things and then deal with it again. It's just a frustrating experience all the way down. This side, you can see I didn't do very well on, for me, because again, when your work go bigger than what you usually do, you're like, okay, how strong do I need, how thick do I need to get this edge, how strong do I need to get this edge, and how far can I hit flakes? And when you're starting on a big piece that's heavy, weighs like 20 pounds or whatever, you can hit a 6-inch flake no problem with a big percussor. But as you're coming down, of course, some of the widest points ever made, you get down to 3.5 kind of inch, 3 3/4 inch kind of stuff on thin stuff. And so, the max length of flakes is like 1.5 inches or something. Well, if you're wider than that and hitting, odds are you're going to have some flakes that run short and roll up. And if you do that, you may have problems removing them, because you can't remove them from the other side. If it's just as wide, you have a 4-inch preform and you hit 2, 1.5-inch flakes. Well, you got an inch in the middle that ain't flakes. So there's just all these tricky little issues with this stuff. And then this was frustrating to me because I just messed up. Let's see if I can get this right where you can see it. This was a pretty good reduction of a big piece of Georgetown yesterday evening, and I had done this other one first. I was real tired and went in. I had all this pattern and went in at 8, and I came back out, and my first or second flake when I came back out is I wasn't thinking. What I did was I had been using 3/8 inch indirect on the starting to come down, and I just mentally wasn't thinking, and I grabbed the 3/8 inch again, thinking the scar patterns needed to stay the same. Well, it's getting thin enough where, and I didn't isolate, and I wasn't isolating platforms. I should have started isolating platforms when I got this thin, or even before then. So it's just kind of a rookie big rock mistake. So anyway, there's that. So I just want to mention balance for a second. Most of my points that I make, I don't show a lot of edge views of stuff because most people don't find edges that exciting, but edges are a big deal, and balance is a big deal from a structural standpoint. But one of the things that I wanted to mention is, if sometimes the work of people who are not doing any grinding or sawing or whatever looks almost like it's perfect, the way that you do that is you can work your point however you want to until you get down towards the final sets and stuff. But once you get close to the final set, you want to try and do the opposite of if you're going to do pattern flaking, either with pressure or with indirect. If you've gotten good enough with indirect, you can do good pattern flaking. Well, with pressure pattern flaking, parallel oblique type stuff or parallel stuff, collateral stuff, whatever, you're creating the ridges you need for subsequent flakes by the preceding flake. So therefore, you don't need to, since you start at the end, you don't need to start with any ridges at all on your surface. So you can consider not trying to do the patterning like you want it on your sets before your last set, but go ahead and try and get yourself the equivalent of a flaked, super clean, super smooth surface by flaking off all the contours and context and everything of the surface, the ridges and stuff, if you're down to the wire and you're narrow enough that you know you can create your own ridges and push the flakes more than halfway. If you can't do that, and if you're not doing pattern flaking, then if you get all the ridges gone, of course your flakes will spread out wide and thin, and they won't get to the center line. You'll have a problem. But anyway, but the other thing I want to say about the edges on pattern flaking, this I did a couple of years ago probably, and I did it I think last at a nap, and I just put it up. This is not set up that well for trying to do something really fine as pattern flaking like an Eden or something, because the edges, if you can see the ground, the deltas are still there, and they're thick right where those deltas are, and the ridges will distort the runs of the flakes. So when you go down here trying to do your patterning flake, you've got different situations all along it. So some flakes are in the hollows from the previous flake, some flakes are on the deltas from the previous flake, etc. So trying to get all your flakes to match and get a really good result is, I mean, it takes some geniosity to do that. So I probably wouldn't. You know, you need to try and get it more uniform is what I'm saying. But anyway, there's a balance. Okay, so I took up all the time on that. I'm going to come right back and I'm going to do some big work and talk about big work. Right back.